Well, I hardly need to introduce you, of course, André. Your achievements are chronicled everywhere. The hotels, the Chateau Marmont, the Mercer, the Raleigh in Miami, coast-to-coast standards by now. The dwellings, the 40 Mercer and Beaver House. Is that, have people moved into that?
Yes.
They have?
Yep.
Okay, it's the Beaver House down on William Street. The architects you've worked with, Jean Nouvel, Richard Gluckman, Polshek Partnership, Calvin Sal, all the thinking hipsters architects, you've worked with them all. Your work, your life, your dating preferences, your new rosé. They've been all covered in Vanity Fair, The Times, The Post, any publication, in fact, that has a pulse these days. But actually today, my interest then is not really your status as a celebrity hotelier that's so interesting to me and to, I think, you guys gathered here. It's your interest in us. And by that I mean your interest in New Yorkers and in, quote, New Yorkers, broadly the citizens of the urban experience, the urban player, if you will. So for the last 2 decades, you've been setting the stage for our most entertaining selves. And so I'm interested in the genesis of this role you've taken on and where you see it going. And so I was going to have my little cards, so unlike Charlene Rose, I was going to put them, all the questions in a hat and have you just pick them out randomly. But I have here some professional and some personal and some public type questions. So maybe let's start with the standard here. We're in a spectacular room that reminds me of the UN. And clearly I know you've worked out every detail. But in the standard, which we've all been following so closely, the lobby's small and the piazza's large. And there's a restaurant that's going to be opening soon this summer. In about a month. And so I'm wondering what your own evolving vision about this as a place that both travelers and locals will use. What's your sense of how that'll play out?
Well, first off, I want to thank you all for coming, and I really want to thank you for embracing the hotel as you've come to know it. You know, it's a rather daunting task to sort of foist, an edifice of this size upon not just the neighborhood, but over what became a public park, and it caused no shortage of angst on my part, especially since so many of my friends amongst you work here, live here. It is a very visible place, and my belief is that a good hotel is always first and foremost of its community. So the concern of, and I know because of previous schemes, ironically one of them developed by Jean, who I'd just worked before on another building in Soho, caused such sort of a negative reaction in the neighborhood because it was so outsized because of how it approached the development of a site with a high line bifurcating it. But so I really thank you for your embrace of what this building has become, and it's very gratifying and a relief.
Well, you seem really quite involved with the community, with that whole balance of kind of having the piazza there and the restaurant open the way it is.
The idea was always to create something that felt appropriate for the site. Among other things, for us, a good hotel is always very much about being site-specific. It's part of the luxury of travel, unlike all the other luxuries we have where you buy a product, but it's the same product world over. One of the last luxuries, I believe, that exists today is travel, because you not only have to have money, but you have to have time. And therefore, to go someplace and feel like you're of that community is just a very magical thing. So in trying to create this space with Todd Schliemann, who is not only a brilliant architect, but
from
Polshek Partners, but also a long-standing friend of mine. We were friends in college. you know, the key was to try to find a language that celebrated not just this community, but this particular site, and then would result in something that felt uniquely New York, uniquely Meatpacking District. And
it must have looked pretty raunchy when you first came down here.
Oh, I remember.
But you must have liked that.
Yeah, I did, certainly. But I remember 10 years ago walking around with a banker trying to convince them to buy the site where the Gansevoort Hotel is, and somewhere along the way some tranny took a great liking to him, and so that deal got, after about 10 minutes of harassment, the deal got scuttled. Anyway, but you know, this particular site was a building owned by the brother of the gentleman who owns the building across the street. It was a 2-story high, very prosaic brick meatpacking warehouse. It covered the entire area that we're in. And you know, the challenge was to create something to minimize the visual impact of this larger edifice coming up, and at the same time sort of create a very friendly space. And you had alluded to the small lobby. There's a very specific reason for that. The distance from the front door to the front desk here is almost the same as the distance from the front door to the front desk at the Mercer, which is, you know, a sixth of the size. But that distance creates a very, very intimate travel distance, and like everything else, it helps minimize the size of the building, the perceptual size of the building. The other thing that was sort of very obvious to you all is the fact that, you know, there is a restaurant that looks like it was a found building. It uses the same vernacular as what's across the street in the historic district with the arched, you know, the canopies and the used brick. And that was meant to sort of draw your eye to that. It would look like a building that was just sort of still nestled under the
It doesn't even seem necessarily connected to that.
It is not connected to it. And the 2 public spaces that you glimpse when you first walk across the plaza are this very small reception area and a very small sitting room, both of which are tucked underneath the High Line, sort of meant to minimize it. And if you, for example, if you're arriving in the back seat of a taxi, the truth is you almost don't even see the building. You know, you don't have the perspective, so you pull up to it, and you're not even aware that there's this, you know, 330-room hotel sort of floating on top of you. But that was a very deliberate design, as well as was the idea of you know, sweeping all of the buildable space, because we did this entirely with no you know, request for special compensation or hardship or anything else. We just did it completely 100% as of right. So the idea was to sort of sweep the FAR that we had, compress it on the ground floor, raise it up, and therefore creating these big public plazas that I think are very, very unique to New York. And they sort of celebrate what I think is one of the unique aspects of the Meatpacking District, which is these large, wide streets which are a function of the trucking and the loading requirements that were always part of the Meatpacking District.
And what do you envision going on there? And in the
well, you know, the way it's set up now, as you know, coming in, it's very much meant to be a public plaza. I think, again, for me, a good hotel is always what makes it unique in its community is that, unlike a restaurant or a bar, you know, you can use it without being expected to pay. You know, you can sort of come in, sit down, use it, and that whole public plaza and the yellow picnic tables out there are meant to be sort of a public amenity, if you will. I hope this winter we'll set up a little ice skating rink, and we'll have that.